When a flood devastated his town, 13-year-old Virgil risked his life to save 17 people, armed with only an air mattress. Quietly returning to his normal life, he never sought recognition. But the community he saved had a surprise waiting for him, one he could never have imagined. What was the big surprise? Stay tuned to find out. But before we dive into this heartwarming story, let us know in the comments where you're listening from. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Let's get started. It began in the dead of night, under a shroud of darkness that blanketed Dickinson, Texas. A torrential downpour transformed the streets into rivers, and within hours, the city was submerged. Chaos erupted as screams echoed through the storm, a haunting symphony of desperation. Helicopters roared overhead, but they passed by, bound for other areas. For the residents of Dickinson, help seemed a world away. Virgil, a quiet 13-year-old with a warm heart, sat in his home, hearing the cries of his neighbors carried on the winds of the storm. The water was rising, fast and merciless, creeping into homes, consuming everything in its path. The world outside was a swirling, terrifying abyss. Yet, it wasn't fear that filled Virgil, it was resolve. The rain fell in relentless sheets, pounding against the windows like a warning. Inside his modest home, Virgil sat on the edge of his bed, the flickering light of a candle casting shadows on the walls. The power had gone out hours ago, and the world outside was eerily silent except for the roar of the storm. He could hear the water lapping against the walls of the house, rising steadily, threatening to engulf everything. Then it happened. His phone buzzed, a momentary lifeline in the darkness. Virgil scrambled to answer, his hands trembling. "Virgil," his friend's voice cracked through the static, trembling with fear. "The water's coming in. We can't get out. Please help us." Virgil froze for a second, his heart pounding. He looked out the window and could barely see through the torrential rain. The murky floodwaters swirled angrily, rising higher and higher, carrying with them pieces of debris, shattered wood, and the unknown horrors that lurked beneath the surface. Snakes, alligators, or worse. He swallowed hard. The terror in his friend's voice echoed in his ears. There was no one else. No helicopters circling overhead. No boats cutting through the water. It was just him. "Stay calm," he said, trying to mask his own fear. "I'm coming." Virgil scanned the room, his eyes falling on an old, worn air mattress tucked in the corner. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. Grabbing it, he slipped on his shoes and stepped into the rising water outside his door. It was ice cold, sending a jolt through his body as it immediately soaked his clothes. He hesitated for only a moment before wading forward. The water was already waist-deep and climbing. Each step was a struggle. The current pushed against him with the weight of the storm's fury, trying to force him back. The water was black, opaque, and alive with unseen dangers. Virgil's heart raced as his feet scraped against submerged debris. He couldn't see what was below, but he knew the risks. The thought of snakes slithering through the flood, of an alligator snapping in the darkness, sent a chill down his spine. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. His friend needed him. And that was all that mattered. The air mattress floated beside him as he pushed forward, his body working against the tide. The rain lashed at his face, making it hard to see. His muscles burned with each movement, but he kept going, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. "Please don't let me be too late," he whispered to himself, a quiet prayer to whoever might be listening. As he swam, memories of his mother's voice came to him. She had always told him, "Virgil, you're stronger than you think. When life pushes you, you push harder." Those words played over and over in his mind like a mantra. He clung to them as he pushed against the current, fighting exhaustion and fear. At one point, the water surged, knocking him off balance. The air mattress slipped from his grasp, drifting out of reach for a terrifying second. Desperation surged within him, and with a burst of energy, he lunged forward, grabbing it just before it was swept away. He clung to the edge, gasping for breath, his heart pounding like a drum. For a moment, he thought about turning back. But then he heard the voice again, his friend's voice, full of fear and desperation. "I can't give up," he said aloud, his voice firm despite the storm. Finally, through the sheets of rain, he saw the faint outline of the apartment building where his friend was trapped. The water was almost to the second floor, but Virgil could make out a light flickering in the window, a faint beacon of hope. "Virgil," his friend shouted, their voice carried by the wind. "I'm here," he yelled back, his voice breaking. Relief flooded his chest as he reached the building. He pressed the air mattress against the side and steadied it, his legs kicking to keep them both afloat. "Come on," he urged as his friend climbed out the window onto the mattress, clutching their younger sibling in their arms. The fear in their eyes was palpable, but seeing Virgil seemed to ease it just a little. One by one, he helped them onto the makeshift raft. The mattress dipped under the weight, threatening to sink, but Virgil held it steady, using his own body to keep it afloat. "You're going to be okay," he said, his voice strong despite the chaos around them. As he pushed them back toward safety, his mind stayed sharp, calculating every move, every breath. His exhaustion didn't matter. The dangers didn't matter. All that mattered was getting them to dry land. By the time they reached safety, the rain had slowed, but the floodwaters still loomed. Virgil helped his friend and their family off the mattress, guiding them into a dry spot in a nearby building where other survivors huddled together. Their tears of gratitude brought a lump to his throat, but he said nothing as another sound pierced the night, a scream. It was coming from a nearby building. A new wave of urgency coursed through him. Somewhere out there, more people needed him. And Virgil wasn't the type to stop when someone needed help. The scream cut through the storm, desperate and haunting. Virgil turned toward the sound and spotted her, a frail elderly woman trapped in a wheelchair, silhouetted in a second-story window. The water was rising fast, lapping at the edge of her apartment, threatening to consume it. Her trembling hands pounded weakly on the glass as she cried for help. Virgil's chest tightened. He didn't think twice. Gripping his air mattress, he swam toward the building, the currents clawing at him with relentless force. Each stroke felt heavier than the last, but he pushed on, fueled by the sight of the woman's tear-streaked face. "I'm here," he shouted, his voice barely carrying over the storm. Her eyes lit up with a glimmer of hope as he reached the window. Using a broken branch from the swirling debris, Virgil struck the window. The glass cracked, then shattered with a loud crash. Carefully, he cleared the jagged edges, water sloshing at his feet as he climbed inside. The woman was shaking, her wheelchair nearly submerged. "I've got you," he said gently, sliding his arms beneath her frail frame. Lifting her took every ounce of his strength, but he carried her to the window and eased her onto the air mattress, ensuring she was secure before climbing back out. As Virgil began to guide the mattress toward safety, the woman grabbed his arm, her voice breaking. "Please, my doll, it's on the shelf. It's all I have." For a moment, Virgil hesitated, glancing back at the flooded apartment. The water was rising, cold and menacing, but her plea was filled with such anguish that he couldn't ignore it. Without a word, he turned and dove back through the broken window. The doll, worn but cherished, sat on a high shelf, barely out of reach of the water. Virgil grabbed it and quickly swam back. When he handed it to her, her tears flowed freely. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching it to her chest. "You don't know what this means." Pushing the air mattress through the flood, Virgil maneuvered them to dry ground, his body aching from the effort. Neighbors rushed to help her, their faces etched with gratitude. She held the doll tightly and turned back to him, her voice trembling. "You're my hero," she said. Virgil didn't reply, simply nodding before turning back toward the floodwaters. There were more people to save. As he swam away, her words echoed in his heart, giving him the strength to face whatever came next. As dawn broke over Dickinson, the floodwaters began to recede, leaving behind a landscape of destruction. Streets were littered with debris, shattered pieces of homes and lives swept away by the storm. Amid the chaos, stories of survival began to surface, and one name quietly rose above the rest: Virgil. But Virgil didn't linger to hear those stories. Exhausted and aching from a night of relentless rescues, he slipped back home in the early morning light. His air mattress, the lifeline he had used to save nearly 17 people, floated beside him as he waded through the remaining water. He didn't seek recognition. He didn't even tell his family the full extent of what he'd done. Instead, he dried off, lay on his bed, and let sleep overtake him. When school reopened, Virgil returned as though nothing extraordinary had happened. His quiet demeanor and unassuming presence masked the heroism of the previous days. His classmates were busy sharing their own stories of the flood, power outages, flooded basements, and the terrifying storm. Few realized that one of them had risked his life to save so many. But Dickinson is a small town, and stories have a way of spreading. The people Virgil had rescued couldn't keep quiet. The elderly woman in the wheelchair, clutching her doll, spoke of the boy who had braved the flood for her. Families, reunited and safe, shared their gratitude for the teenager who had appeared in their darkest hour. The whispers grew louder. Teachers overheard conversations, neighbors pieced together the stories, and soon the truth was undeniable. Virgil, the quiet boy in their midst, was the hero everyone was talking about. When a classmate finally asked him about it, Virgil shrugged, his face flushing with embarrassment. "It wasn't a big deal," he said, looking away. But for the people he had saved, it was everything. Parents came to the school to thank him, tears in their eyes. "You saved my family," one mother said, her voice breaking. "You're a hero." Virgil's humility only deepened the admiration people felt for him. He didn't see himself as special, just someone who did what needed to be done. But for Dickinson, his actions were a beacon of hope, proving that even in the darkest times, courage and kindness could shine through. Virgil returned to his quiet life, but the town would never forget what he had done. In their eyes, he wasn't just a boy, he was a hero. One morning felt like an ordinary morning to Virgil. He walked into school with his usual quiet demeanor, unaware that the entire town had gathered to honor him. Midway through the day, an announcement came. All students were to report to the auditorium for an assembly. Virgil didn't think twice, assuming it was a routine post-flood gathering. But as he stepped into the auditorium, he stopped. The room was packed, not just with students, but with teachers, parents, and neighbors. The air buzzed with energy, and Virgil's brow furrowed in confusion. Why was everyone here? The principal took the stage, her voice filled with warmth. "Today we're here to celebrate a young man whose courage and selflessness saved lives during the flood," she announced. "Virgil, you showed us the best of humanity when we needed it most." Before Virgil could react, the entire room erupted into applause. People stood, their cheers and claps filling the space like thunder. His classmates cheered loudly, and adults wiped tears from their eyes. Virgil froze, his face flushed with embarrassment, as the applause grew louder, washing over him like a wave. Hesitant and shy, Virgil stood, glancing nervously at the crowd. His hands fidgeted, his gaze darting to the floor, but the warmth in the room steadied him. They weren't just cheering for his actions, they were celebrating his heart. Finally, a small smile broke across his face, growing as the applause continued. Gratitude shimmered in his eyes, and for the first time, he allowed himself to feel the depth of the community's appreciation. People called out to him, "Thank you, Virgil. You saved my family." Each voice was a reminder of the lives he had touched. When the principal handed him a microphone, Virgil hesitated, his voice soft as he said, "I just did what I thought was right." The crowd erupted again, their cheers now filled with even more admiration. Virgil stood a little taller, his shyness giving way to a quiet pride. He hadn't sought recognition, but in that moment, he realized how much his actions had meant to everyone. As the assembly ended, people surrounded him, shaking his hand and thanking him. For Virgil, the celebration wasn't about the applause, it was about the connections it created. His quiet courage had united a fractured community, reminding them all of the power of kindness and selflessness. In that moment, Virgil allowed himself to feel proud, not for being a hero, but for making a difference. Virgil's story reached far beyond Dickinson. The producers of the film Wonder, a story about choosing kindness, heard about his heroism. Inspired by his selflessness, they decided to honor him. During the celebration, they presented Virgil with a scholarship to help with his education and announced a donation to Hurricane Harvey relief efforts in his name. Tears filled the room as the community realized the magnitude of what Virgil had done. His courage had not only saved lives, but also inspired hope in a time of despair. For Virgil, the applause and recognition were overwhelming, but the gratitude from those he saved touched his heart. The woman in the wheelchair held his hand tightly, whispering, "You saved me and my family. I'll never forget you." Others echoed her sentiment, their words filled with love and admiration. Virgil's story became a beacon of hope, a reminder that kindness and courage can emerge from the most unexpected places. He didn't see himself as a hero, But the town of Dickinson knew better. As the applause faded and the crowd dispersed, Virgil slipped quietly back into the rhythm of his life, unchanged by the recognition. He wasn't looking for fame or admiration. He was just a boy who did what he felt was right. But his actions had left an indelible mark, not just on the lives he saved, but on everyone who heard his story. In the darkest hours, when the world seemed to crumble around them, one boy's courage lit a path to safety and hope. Virgil's story is more than a tale of heroism. It's a testament to the extraordinary power of quiet strength and compassion. He reminds us that greatness doesn't require a spotlight. It's found in the choices we make to help others, no matter how small or impossible the task may seem. And Virgil? He's proof that heroes walk among us, silent, unassuming, yet capable of incredible acts of kindness. Virgil's story challenges us to look beyond ourselves and ask, how can I be a hero in someone else's life? Because the truth is, no matter who you are or where you come from, you have the power to do great things. The world needs more people like Virgil, quiet champions of courage and kindness. So will you answer the call? And remember, to celebrate those who chose to be kind, tag them in the comments below. Thank you for watching.